On my 7th birthday, my mother made me a race car cake. She'd stayed up the previous night until pale sunlight began to filter through the thin white and blue checkered curtains of our small kitchen window. I know this because I drank one too many cups of apple juice at dinner and my bladder could only take so much. I remember how tired she looked when I peered into the kitchen on my way to the bathroom, and how all I cared about at the time was that she'd chosen the wrong colors for the frosting. I think pink and purple were too girly. I don't remember much of my birthday party. Erica Sander tipped her chair so far back that she toppled right over, and her mother took her home early, scolding her about safety as she struggled with our barely functional front door. George McCullough showed us how he could snort milk through his nose. I threw a tantrum over the girly colors on my cake. My stepfather demanded that everyone leave early, red in the face, barely holding composure. I woke up in the hospital several hours later, confused, ears still ringing, dark bruises on my neck, near one eye, and obscuring both sides of my head. I couldn't hear the doctor's words as he smiled warmly and welcomed me back into consciousness. I couldn't hear my mother's cries. I couldn't even hear my own screams. My stepfather moved out several days later. My story begins 14 years after the birthday party. It wasn't too common for head trauma to result in deafness, but I'd never been all that lucky. Despite spending 2/3 of my life without hearing, I'd never quite adjusted to the lonely life of a deaf introvert. When I walked through the crowded streets of my city, I used to wish I could hear the conversations, the loud cars, the bustle of rushing businessmen. How foolish I was to wish I could hear it all. The warm glow of the setting sun told me that once again I'd lost track of time, wading through endless deadlines and paperwork. I scolded myself for working extra hours, robbing myself of precious moments of gloomy isolation back in my apartment. Finally, on the bus home, I settled my briefcase in my lap and began to map out my evening in my mind. It only took a few lurching stops of the bus for me to notice that the small screen that usually displayed the name of the upcoming stop wasn't working. Cursing slightly under my breath, I strained my eyes to see through the foggy windows, but it was too blurry for me to make out any familiar shapes. Thinking quickly, I tapped the shoulder of the woman sitting beside me. She turned to look at me, clearly annoyed, and I held up a finger to signal her to wait. I hurriedly pulled out a piece of paper and messily scrawled the name of my stop and a short explanation of my situation, in hopes that she could tell me when the driver announced Parkside Drive. When I turned to show her the paper, she had already moved to a new seat. You'd think nearly a decade and a half of being deaf would bring me enough experience to deal with a situation like this, but I wasn't good at coping. I sighed and began to count the stops, trying to estimate how many stops I needed to sit through to get to my own. Annoyance bubbled under my skin. Without thinking, I angrily tore the small piece of paper into several pieces, clenching the crumpled bits in my fist. Idiot. I'm sorry? I looked up, irritated, searching for whoever had spoken. I had begun silent cursing again when it hit me. I had heard. I took a quick glance around, confused, but much to my dismay, everyone around me had gone silent again. Was I going mad? I caught a glimpse outside as the door opened and closed. Damn it, I had just missed my stop. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. I'd spent the past 6 hours in bed, window wide open, straining to hear any hint of sound. I barely cared that I had to work the next day. I'd gotten a taste of what I'd missed for 2/3 of my life, and I wanted more. When a car sped past my building, illuminating my room in a bright white light, I finally got what I'd asked for. What are you waiting for? An answer, I suppose, I replied. My conversation partner did not deliver. I tried to rid my sleep-deprived mind of thoughts about what I'd heard, but my morning routine was distracted and messy. I examined myself in the mirror, trying to smooth away any stray shampoo bubbles I'd missed, as I had absent-mindedly rinsed my hair, I had half turned away when something odd caught my eye. Something was not quite right. As I turned back to investigate, I placed my finger on the glaring inconsistency. My reflection hadn't moved an inch. I furrowed my brow and raised one hand into the air. My reflection did the same, steadily holding my gaze. Then he smiled. He waggled his fingers at me in a wave. Not even a hello? His voice was a high-pitched giggle. He grinned at me, his smile so wide, I thought the tendons in his face might tear apart. I stared back, feeling something between relief and fear. What do you want? My voice was hoarse and shaky from years without use, but I tried to sound as firm as I could. I want what you want. After all, I am you. And what is it that I want? I was nearly too afraid to ask. Just a little justice. Its smile grew wider before it began to fade to match my own expression once more. I took a deep breath, and so did my reflection. I slowly backed out of my bathroom and away from the mirror. He was right. I did want justice. It was almost 9 o'clock in the morning. I'd emailed my boss to let her know I was sick. I suppose that wasn't really a lie. I was lightheaded and nauseous from my encounter, but I knew what I had to do. My first stop was the hardware store. I picked up a length of rope, but the voice of my reflection corrected me. Duct tape will do better. I haphazardly tossed a roll of duct tape and a crowbar onto the counter. Glancing at the digital numbers displaying my total, I handed the cashier a wad of crumpled bills and headed out with my supplies. Now go to him. You know, he never left the building. My voice directed me onto a bus, and before I knew it, I was headed into an eerily familiar part of the city. The houses grew smaller and shabbier as we went, lawns losing their perfectly even green to be replaced with overgrown weeds and dead brown grass. Then, even the houses began to dwindle, towering, dark, damp apartment buildings taking their place. A chill shook me to the bone, and my clammy hands quivered as though they were freezing. The bus let me off, and my heartbeat grew louder and rougher. I walked slowly until my voice commanded me to quicken my pace. The elevator groaned as it ascended, and I felt as though I might groan too. Anxiety racked my bones, but my steps had become sure. Knock. You know he's home. I sucked in one deep breath and rapped my knuckles against the door. What? A gruff voice responded from inside. I didn't dare answer. What? Footsteps pounded angrily, closer and closer. My stepfather yanked the door open, his face a deep shade of red that I remembered all too well. He opened his mouth, taken aback by the sight of this stepson he hadn't seen in nearly 14 years. But before he could speak, I had struck him with the crowbar. He crumpled to the ground, and I nearly didn't recognize the sight of him on the floor. He was weak, arms limp at his sides. Powerless. I acted quickly, using the duct tape to restrain his arms and legs, placing one final piece over his mouth, in the hopes of muffling any screams. I had just finished when my stepfather began to awaken. Impeccable timing, just like in the movies. My reflection began to giggle, that high-pitched giggle, and all I wanted to do was cover my ears and drown it out. My stepfather's eyes fluttered open, widening suddenly as they met mine. He tried to scream, but it was no use. What's the matter, Dad? Cat got your tongue? I spat at him, mimicking the words he'd used to torment me before he left, taunting me as I cowered silently in fear. As he screamed muffled protests, I pulled a knife from my bag and held it to his throat. I'll bet you want me to make it fast, I sneered. Blood pounded in my head, and all I could think of was the sting of his fist against my face, his fingers tight around my wrists as he held me back from escaping. I let the tip of the blade slice into his skin, and his screams got more desperate. I didn't feel guilty as I toyed with him, mutilating his face, slicing out his tongue, removing his ears slowly, painfully. Blood dripped from my hands and from the deep gashes in his skin. I played the scene over and over in my head as I rode my bus home. I was almost frightened by the rush I'd gotten as I plunged my knife into his skull, finally finishing the job. I knew I'd get caught. I wasn't careful. I just didn't care. Did he deserve to die? My voice startled me out of thought. I rolled my eyes and ignored it. Did he deserve to die? I was asked again as I entered my apartment. Maybe, maybe not. At the very least, he deserved to pay. I finally responded. So, you get to play God? You get to dole out punishments as you see fit? My voice giggled. You told me to do this. You're not so innocent yourself. You're right. I'm not. My voice taunted. And I am you. And you are guilty. Guilty of what? Giving that piece of crap what he deserved? You killed a man. You killed someone. You didn't even feel remorse. I didn't know what to say. I headed to the bathroom to wash the last of his blood from under my fingernails. My eyes were drawn to the mirror above the sink, but I regretted looking up before my eyes even met my own. He grinned gleefully as he met my gaze. You're a murderer! You're no better than me! He cackled. I stared back at him. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout and shake his shoulders and make him understand that I gave my stepfather no less than he deserved. Killer! Killer! His laughs grew higher, wider, tormenting me as he pointed an accusing finger. What's the matter, son? Cat got your tongue? He giggled. He stared me down as he lifted my bloody knife into view. I backed away instinctively, words still on the verge of spilling over my tongue. My reflection stayed put. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. I stared in disbelief as he took his tongue between two fingers and raised the blade against it. My mouth was slightly agape, but I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. Blood dribbled down his chin, and I could hear the droplets fall to the floor, as if they were in the same room with me. I slowly lifted my fingers to my own lips to find that they were wet. Tentatively, I glanced down to find what I had feared. The floor was darkened at my feet with a gathering pool of blood. I opened my mouth, but while I felt a shriek escape my throat, all I could hear was the guttural, choking laugh of my reflection. I will never speak again. I've broken every mirror in my apartment. All I can do now is sit and wait for the consequences of my crimes to unfold, or at least further consequences. Amanda was standing in the darkness, beating her fists against the refrigerator door. The commotion had wrenched me out of a deep and dreamless sleep. When I'd crept down the hall to investigate, I'd had panicked thoughts of intruders stealing into the house to gut my family. But when I made it to the kitchen, I found only my wife, standing in her nightie, looking somewhat like an apparition, banging in a steady rhythm upon the hapless appliance. I nudged the dimmer switch up in the hopes of shedding even just a little light on the situation. It didn't work. I still didn't understand what was happening. What's wrong? I asked. You don't hear that? That frickin' buzz? I listened. It was more of a hum than a buzz, I thought, and a very gentle one at that. One you wouldn't notice unless you were paying attention. That's how it always sounds. No, it's broken. You don't hear that? It's freaking loud. I can't sleep. It's keeping me up. I nudged the switch a little higher, and now I could see that Amanda wasn't kidding around. She looked positively haggard, and in the light, even more like a ghost than she had in the dark. It sounds normal, I said again. That's what I was really afraid of. Amanda closed her eyes and spread a hand out across her face, gripping her temples with her thumb and middle finger. It's in my head. You hear a buzzing sound in your head? I bit my lip. Do you think? Yes. Yes, I picked something up on my trip. God knows what it could be. I took all my vaccines. Those don't work sometimes. So it would seem. I was groggy and wanting to get back to bed. Well, we'll figure it out in the morning. We'll get you right to the doc first thing. For now, try to get some sleep. I can't. Take an Ambien. I've already had 3. It sounds like a damn beehive in there, Walt. It won't shut up. I looked at the clock. Working 4 hours. You've tried Tylenol? I've been awake all night. I've tried Tylenol, yes. I've tried reading the freaking Bible too, but before you ask, I've tried everything. It won't stop. Should we go to the ER? Wake up the kids and go to the ER or call an ambulance? Amanda shook her head. Just go back to bed, Walt. I'll be okay. Just go back to bed and on your way out, kill that damn light. I did just that. A few hours later, with the sun creeping into the sky, I shut up the alarm clock and looked over to see that Amanda hadn't made it back to bed. I found her soon enough, sitting on the kitchen floor. She had pulled the refrigerator away from the wall and unplugged it. She looked wild and unhealthy, less the ghost now and more the decomposing corpse. Honey, it won't stop. It will never stop. I made you coffee. The buzzing still? I asked, pulling a mug out of the cabinet and pouring myself a cup. Like a swarm of bees, she said. No, like a swarm of angry wasps. Never went to sleep, huh? Never did. All right, I'm calling off work today, and I'm taking you to Dr. Henderson. I looked down at her. She had a blank look on her face, and for a moment, I could vividly hear a buzzing in my own head. We'll get you all fixed up. Jacob Henderson was a friend of mine. We played poker together every Friday night. I called his personal line to find him just on his way to the hospital and filled him in on my wife's condition. Amanda's got it bad. This buzzing in her head that kept her up all night, we think she got it from stomping around in Thailand last week, though she was up to date on her vaccines. Well, I'll go ahead and clear a spot for her. Can you bring her in right away? Yes, thank you, Jake. I hung up and turned to Amanda. She was shivering now, her teeth audibly chattering. The sound made me shiver. He said he can fit you in first thing. I'll drop you off, bring the kids to school, then come right back to check in on you. My wife gave no indication that she'd heard me. Amanda? Suddenly, she leapt to her feet and took off running, out of the kitchen and down the hall. After a moment, I heard a door slam shut. I followed behind to the bathroom door and knocked. Amanda! I was answered by a terrible, roady retch, followed by a splash, as if a large volume of liquid being poured out over the tile floor. Aaron came out of his room, dressed in his pajamas, his hair sticking up in a cowlick, and asked, "Was that Mom? Is she okay?" "Your mother is feeling a bit under the weather today, but she'll be fine." From the bathroom, another retch, another splash. "I'm going to drop her off with Dr. Henderson and he'll fix her right up. But I need your help this morning, okay, buddy? Need you to go get your sister moving, and then the both of you get ready for school, okay?" Aaron nodded and walked off to his sister's room. I tried the knob. Locked. "You okay in there, honey?" Silence. Or was it? I put my ear against the door. Not silence. Buzzing. Very faint buzzing, but definitely present. "Amanda, please answer." What if she'd passed out? Maybe she fell and hit her head on the way down. I decided to pick the lock. It was a privacy lock and would be easy to do with a straightened out paperclip. I pulled my head away from the door, and an instant later there was a click, and Amanda slipped out of an opening that was barely big enough for her body to fit through. She closed the door behind her and kept her hand on the knob. "I'm fine, honey," she said. "Totally 100% better. The buzzing's gone and I feel fine. Just got a little sick. I'm thinking it was something I ate." She really did look better. Tired still, but no longer on the verge of death. "Well, let's have Dr. Henderson look you over anyway. It's all arranged." "No," she snapped. An ugly rage flashed across her face and then was gone, leaving a gentle smile in its wake. "I told you, I'm feeling quite well now." I didn't want to press the matter too insistently. Taking her to the hospital would mean missing work, and when I missed work, the work didn't magically disappear, but rather piled up on my desk. I was just getting over one ulcer and wanted to avoid another if possible. You sure? Amanda nodded. If you're sure. I am, but could you still take the kids in today? I'm going to clean up in the bathroom, then hit the hay. I'm beat. Of course, I nodded at the door. Let me just do my business in there and I'll be out of your hair. No. You can't go in there. It's embarrassing. Nothing I haven't seen before. Come on now, I'll be late. Use the kids' bathroom. This one is a war zone. I can't let you in there. I shrugged and was getting ready to turn around when I heard that buzzing sound again, a little louder now, coming from the other side of the door. What's that sound? That buzz? Amanda was silent for a beat, then let out a mechanical laugh. It didn't sound like her at all. Now you're the one hearing the buzz. Maybe you should consult with Dr. Henderson yourself after you drop off the kids. You probably have a case of what I had. It's not fun at all. I promise you that. Something's off about her, I thought. Then, sure there is. She's been up all night and just puked her guts out. Relax. Oh. It didn't look fun, no. I headed off to the kids' bathroom. As soon as I was a few steps down the hall, I heard Amanda open the door again. I stopped and turned to see her disappear back inside. With the door open, the buzzing grew temporarily louder. There's something in there. It's not in my head. But then I realized Amanda had spent all night in front of the refrigerator, convinced that the noise was coming from there, even after I had borne witness to the contrary. Maybe I do have a bit of food poisoning. I put the matter out of my mind and went about my day. That afternoon, at the crest of a wave of progress against my towering workload, I got a call from my kids' school. Amanda hadn't picked them up. Normally, she picked them. The school secretary said that she'd tried the other numbers listed before mine, but none of them had reached a human being. I was a little put out, but figured, fair enough. Amanda had a rough night and needs rest. She's probably off in dreamland right now. I picked up Aaron and Margaret and, to their delight, took them out for ice cream. I wanted to give my wife a little extra time to sleep before I dropped the kids off with her and went back to work. But I did need to get back to it. So as soon as we got home, and the kids went barreling off for their toys, I went to my bedroom, bracing myself for the unpleasant but necessary task of awakening my wife. But my wife wasn't in our bedroom. Amanda? I knew that she was home because her car was in the driveway. But if not in bed, then where? And why wasn't she answering her phone? I walked through the house, calling her name, sticking my head into each room. When I got to the hall bathroom, I was greeted by a closed door and an undeniable buzz. Something was wrong. A part of me wanted to pretend that it wasn't, and to just keep walking down the hall, out the door, and back into my car. Back to the office to make some more progress, make some more money. But no, that was my wife in there. I loved her. We'd made vows and had children together, who were now playing in the living room, oblivious to any kind of danger. I couldn't abandon them either, though some dark and primal urge, stirred by the buzzing sound, was telling me to run for my life, no matter the cost. Amanda had been right. It really did sound like a swarm of angry wasps. It was menacing in a way that was both organic and mechanical, which, I suppose, was true enough of wasps. Single-minded drones like programmed robots, but alive too, and looking, finally, for nothing more than an excuse to plunge their poisonous stingers into your flesh. I knocked on the door. Amanda? I knew that she wouldn't answer, but I hoped that she would. I hoped that she was in there perfectly fine, having just woken up from her nap. And then the buzz was from her use of some kind of electrical device. Let it be a vibrator if need be. Hell, let her be in there with the defensive line of the Dallas Cowboys. Her only requirement that they trim their pubic hair with an electric razor before she sucks each of their dicks utterly dry. Let it be anything other than the unspeakably awful thing that I knew it absolutely would be, even as I didn't know the specifics of what that nightmare would manifest itself as. I took a breath and tried the knob that I knew wouldn't turn. It didn't. The buzzing seemed to intensify, becoming agitated by my attempts at intrusion. There was no more procrastinating. I made my way through the living room where Aaron and Margaret were engaging in a mock battle between superheroes. "Super freeze!" cried my daughter. "It didn't work," said my son. "I drank some antifreeze before I got here." In the study, I rummaged through my desk drawers until I found a paperclip. I straightened it out with unsteady hands and wielded it, past my playing children, back to the bathroom door. Just get it over with, I thought, sticking the wire into the small hole in the knob. I wiggled it around a bit until I heard the click of the lock coming undone. I was almost grateful for the sound of my pulse thudding in my head as I pushed the door open. It temporarily drowned out the droning buzz coming from within. There inside the bathroom was my wife. She was stark naked and crouched above what looked like a writhing ball of insect larvae and human feces. Some of the larger larvae were emerging from this central mass and crawling all over Amanda, finding a suitable piece of flesh and attaching themselves to suck out the final bit of sustenance needed to become adults. Above her head, hanging from the ceiling, was a nascent nest, swarmed by what did indeed look like wasps, striped black and yellow, buzzing and nasty. Amanda was twitching all over, but otherwise unmoving. Her eyes were blank and her face was slack. She was, I realized, gone. Overtaken body and mind by these parasitic wasps. One of them had found her, probably while she was in Thailand, and had laid eggs inside of her. Did it do this through a sting, or by crawling into her mouth while she slept? No matter the method, the insect had succeeded, and the eggs thrived in my wife's body, protected from the outside world. She gave them a free ride to America, back to our house, and then, when they were ready to hatch, she had vomited them up on the bathroom floor. There, in various stages of development, they had fed all day, either on her crap or her blood. They grew fast into adults, who now swarmed around her head and plucked the hair off her head, in order to build their nest. I understood this on instinct, like how a mouse understands a cat. Come to think of it, there was a parasite for that too. Toxoplasma gondii, which thrives in cats, but will settle initially for a mouse. The parasite's special talent was to make the rodent unafraid of felines and so easy prey. The cat without sport would eat the oblivious mouse, its flight function disengaged, and the parasite would get what it wanted all along, to live on and reproduce in the cat. Life can be a nasty business all around. My own fear response, however, remained fully intact, and even as I took in the scene before me, as the thoughts swirled in my head, contributing to the discordant symphony in there, alongside the organic mechanical buzz and my pounding pulse, I retreated. I slammed the door behind me and braced myself against the wall in front of me, dizzy. Good God, what do I do? Amanda was beyond help, it seemed. There was no coming back from that. Her mind, and so her body, had been taken over by them, in the same way that certain other species of parasitic wasps will take over the body of a spider and have it spin a protective cocoon around them, or how certain fungi will take over the minds of ants, turning them into half-dead slaves under their control. Nobody quite knew how it worked, only that it did work, and was terrifying. Those things were in there, all too rapidly growing into adults, building their nest. Amanda's body would serve them for a while, but once that resource was depleted, they'd want to be seeking other hosts, seeping through every crack, looking for fresh meat. Maybe that would happen sooner rather than later. Maybe they were already searching for the exit. I turned slowly and looked at the crack under the door. In horror, I tore off my shirt and spread it out on the floor, attempting to blockade the gaping gateway between the horrible world of the bathroom and this world. And even more horror, I looked down at my naked arm to see one of them on there, crawling. I slapped at it madly until it was mush. Had it stung me? Or was that just the sting from my own slaps? Get the kids. Get out of here. Then call the police, or call an exterminator, or burn the house down. Just get out of there. I ran into the living room and grabbed my kids roughly by their arms, dragging them along behind me. Did it sting me? Did it inject me with its nightmare eggs? Are there more on me? Did it sting me? Is it too late? Are they behind us giving chase? Did it sting me? As my mind screamed, my children screamed. That hurts, Dad. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? I didn't stop to explain. I kept running, praying that the buzz that filled my head was only the sound of my nerves sizzling out. I am told that when the police arrived at the scene, my wife was already dead. After some pressing on my part, an officer disclosed that there was no writhing ball of larvae on the tile floor, nor any larvae attached to Amanda's body, but that there was a massive nest hanging from the ceiling, with a thick swarm of adult wasps encircling it. It happens, the officer said. They'll build a nest wherever they can. He shuddered. Nasty. Do you really think we wouldn't notice a colony of wasps building a giant nest in our bathroom? How long does that normally take? Weeks? And we didn't notice? I was frustrated because nobody believed my story about some sort of supercharged species of parasitic wasps. Wasps might have taken over the body of a ladybug, I was told, but no species exists that can take over the body of a person. And yet, no other really plausible explanation for what had happened was proffered. I certainly would have noticed it, the officer admitted. But then again, I'm trained to observe my environment at all times. I'm trained to notice the slightest detail out of place. I tried a different approach. The nest was made out of her hair. You tested that, right? Lots of stray hairs in a bathroom, available to anyone or anything looking for such material. I sat in disbelief for a moment, across the desk from this officer. I knew that I couldn't convince him of the truth. He'd already made up his mind. The truth lay in matters beyond his knowledge and understanding of the world, and, rather than expand his understanding of the world, he had chosen to contort the truth to make it fit. This is how the world will end, I thought. After days and nights of mourning and erratic sleep characterized by terrifying nightmares, I had little emotion to lend the thought. There was only a flicker of rage. Let me review. According to what you're telling me, a massive colony of wasps was picking up my wife's stray hairs for weeks on end and building a huge nest in our bathroom, completely without our notice. And then, one day, Amanda undresses to get in the shower and lo, she finally notices the enormous nest. The sudden sight frightens her so much that she defecates and then drops dead of a heart attack, the marks all over her body. An unexplained but unrelated rash of some sort. Case closed. Is that right? Unfortunately, sir, that's the long and short of it. I know that it's hard to hear. It seems such an undignified way to go. If it makes you feel better, I saw that nest with my own eyes, and I'm not ashamed to say that I pissed myself. There's no shame in being human. Those are scary. One of them got me in the neck while I was in there. I'll tell you, the only thing worse than getting stung by one of those things is getting shot, which I have been. The officer patted his shoulder. Right here. You got stung? All in the line of duty. I stood up. Well, I have to thank you for your time. I needed some closure, I suppose, and now I have it. The officer smiled. I'm very sorry about your wife, sir. The only advice that I can give is to hang in there. Life goes on, you'll see. Even now, somebody needs your attention. It's okay. You can go ahead and answer your phone now. It must be important. The damn thing's been buzzing for 5 minutes straight. My phone was in the car with the kids. It can wait. Thank you again, and good luck. I left his office and walked outside. The sky was overcast. The investigation was complete, as was the fumigation, and the kids and I were due to move back into our house. We were in fact on our way to do just that. But suddenly, it seemed like a good idea to go somewhere very far away instead. Thank you for making it this far. I'd like to encourage you to subscribe if you like my content. If you'd like to follow me and want to be involved in what I'm doing / talk to me, follow me on Twitter or Instagram. If you'd like an offline experience, check out the podcast, The Midnight Podcast. And if you're at all inclined, I've got some merch out there to be purchased if you'd like to support the channel. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next video.